It's that time again. It's Tuesday, or if you're not listening to it on Tuesday, it's a different day. But either way, welcome back to Off the Bench. I'm Brandon Carney, alongside my returning co-host, Pat Gustafson. Pat, how was your little trip around the world?
They tried to get rid of me.
Pat was actually in a battle with the FCC. I had to get him rights to be back on the show.
They said I had to wear pants, and I said hell
Ooh.
no.
Yeah, no, that's a deal breaker. I think if the FCC starts trying to make you wear pants, we either cancel or we go to ESPN or something.
We quadruple down on this and just get naked.
Yeah, that's what's stopping us from going to a network like ESPN is we just haven't been motivated enough to do it yet. But Pat, how was your little trip? Did you have a good time? You don't got to go into major detail,
sure.
but how was it?
I was out in Portland, Oregon for a week. Beautiful out there. And then the reason I was hoping that I would be able to kind of zoom in for this, but we were in Seattle on Tuesday, the day of the podcast. Went to a Mariners game. Mariners beat the Braves 3-2. Beautiful night, beautiful stadium. Would have been fun to be here, but so be it. And like anytime traveling, I got sick, so now I'm sick. So this
I
is
do
my
the same
Jordan,
thing.
This is my Jordan flu game, but I mean, like I think we might be on the last day of it, which is good because I leave again Friday. So like, you don't want to see me traveling sick. Like,
Dude's traveling more than Taylor Swift. We got to get you a private jet.
Taylor's. Almost just made a Taylor Swift 9/11 joke, but all right, podcast, yay, Pat's back.
We had enough 9/11 jokes during the Tom Brady roast, which I also watched, and it was quite good. If anybody didn't get a chance to watch it, at least look up the highlights because I mean it was like a 3-hour show, but it was pretty good. Yeah,
surely nothing from the Central Connecticut area got mentioned at all, correct?
Referring to
Hernandez? Who?
yeah.
Surely there was no mention.
No, there were absolutely no mention. Certainly not almost every presenter talking about it. And then Aaron Hernandez's former wife, because of him, coming out and saying, "Oh, I can't believe they would make jokes like that when my daughter is going to hear about them." And I'm like, well,
don't get impregnated by someone who allegedly killed 5 people.
Yeah, she was like, my daughters are going to see this and see these terrible things about a man who was a hero to them. And I'm like, well, hate to break it to you. They were going to get that reality check.
Who's
eventually.
Their other hero? O.J. Simpson? This must be a tough week for them.
It's definitely a tough week for the absolutely most delusional people among us. But yes, Pat, while you were gone, one thing I will say is don't ever leave me alone again because I vastly underestimated how difficult it would be to talk for an hour by myself. Not that I didn't have
I do it every night.
Not that I didn't have the material to do it. Like, obviously, it was the post-draft show, and I had plenty to talk about. But to do this, like, also live for the people that may tune in and out during it, to not take, like, a long break in between talking was very difficult. To just kind of record something and cut it up and make a pod out of that, I could have definitely done that. But the live aspect of it was much more difficult than anticipated. But nonetheless, you are back, and we have many things to talk about. Folks, the show for today is going to be mostly 99% fantasy football focused. We're going to go over the fantasy football impacts of, basically every major offensive player that was drafted, those who we can reasonably expect to be productive this year, or those who we think could impact, established players who we expect to be productive this year. And we are also going to get a couple of Pat's thoughts just on the draft overall because, we didn't get those last week. And we are going to do actually a draft of the most fantasy relevant players. So that's kind of how we're going to approach it. Last year, Pat, we'll go over this real quick. We did the same thing last year where we drafted our favorite kind of fantasy rookies, guys we expected to contribute. We were trying to put together a list of 5 guys that we thought would, be pretty immediate fantasy contributors and do a good job their rookie season. And I will say, Pat absolutely demoralized me looking back now at the squads that we drafted. I had the first pick. I boldly took Jahmyr Gibbs with the first pick, and that honestly didn't work out too bad. He finished with, I think, 1 less fantasy point in PPR than Bijan Robinson, so it just took it was a different kind of arc for Jahmyr, right? It was like very slower start in the first month and then kind of pop off. Bijan was just, classic Arthur Smith Falcons, up and down, but still had some really elite games and overall elite production. But the 5 guys I drafted were Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jonathan Mingo, Sam Laporta, and Josh Downs. So hit on Gibbs, hit on Laporta, shout out to the Lions, half hit on Josh Downs, and then a pretty big whiff overall on Smith and Jigba and Jonathan Mingo, whereas Pat's 5 were Bijan Robinson, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Anthony Richardson, and Rashee Rice, all of whom were very fantasy relevant for at least portions of the season, if not the entire season. So shout out to Pat there. Pat, you kind of smoked me on that one.
I am looking forward to absolutely not running it back.
Pat is not feeling good about the prospects this year.
I fumble the first pick the way Bran did last year.
This year I feel like there is just as obvious of a pick this year anyway.
I think it's more obvious this year, honestly.
Yeah, it probably is. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But Pat, again, you were gone for the post-draft episode. Real quick, do you have any overarching major thoughts on the draft? And also I want to get your thoughts on the Brock Bowers pick. You can start anywhere you like. How did you feel about the draft a couple weeks back at this point?
I mean, just the overarching thing more so from a fantasy perspective is we knew the wide receiver talent was there. We knew the wide receiver depth was there. I didn't think it was all going to fly off in the first round the way it did. Seeing guys like Xavier Worthy and Ricky Pearsall and these guys go in the first round was something I certainly didn't expect. And we're going to talk about all of those guys. And we all knew that who was the first defensive player taken again? It was like
Byron Murphy, I believe.
Yeah, Murphy. His last
Name is
yes.
Murphy. Yes, it is in
Byron
fact Murphy. Pat spent our entire mock draft show calling him Mitchell, and in fairness to Pat, I didn't correct him because
who is Byron Mitchell? Like, who is Mitchell?
I swear Byron Mitchell's a person, which is also why I didn't correct it.
Was there another person with the last name Mitchell? Byron Mitchell, convicted of trying to kill.
I searched Byron Mitchell football, and all I've gotten is Shenandoah University 2013 and Albright College athletics coach. So
man convicted of trying to kill roommate, sentenced to life in prison. All right, we're investigating further here.
Folks, if this doesn't tell you that we are certainly a fantasy-centric, fantasy-focused, offensive side of the ball-focused pod, I don't know what does other than us not getting Byron Murphy's name right over the course of a very long podcast. Right. You did get the pick right. That is true. I gave you credit last week. We definitely got more right in this year's mock than last.
Oh my God, it didn't take much.
I think we had like six picks that were right, and then like 2 more that we got like the landing spot, but with the wrong pick.
I think that counts. I think it counts.
I think so too. It's definitely better than nothing. So,
but yeah, so that was, I guess, slightly surprising to see them kind of come off a little sooner than thought, and then just the complete lack of defense. And I mean, there probably should have been a defender in the top 10, more like the top 8.
Yeah. Yep.
What in the world? What in the world was Atlanta thinking? Like, just to, again, if you say they were rolling with Desmond Ridder for another year, absolutely take Michael Penix. But to go and spend the money they spent on Kirk Cousins, who, granted, we'll see what it's like coming off the Achilles. He's got a few good years left in him. With all that guaranteed money, to say that, like, hey, we're going to go for this. Like, we've got Bijan Robinson, we've got Drake London, we've got Kyle Pitts, we've got a solid offensive line. Could really use some help in the front 7. And you go and take a guy who's not going to see the field this year, knock on wood, barring a Kirk Cousins injury. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking? This was not... this was a luxury pick for a team that is not in that territory. Like, if they're in the late 20s, like Packers taking Jordan Love, for example. One, they were really good. Like, they could afford to make that luxury kind of pick 1 year later. There's not as many readily available prospects. But, like, to go with the quarterback of the future when you just sign a guy, don't tell the guy or his camp, hey, we're drafting your replacement 8th overall instead of getting somebody to help you. Assumingly, I think it should have been Jared Verse or Dallas Turner, excuse me. Either one of them, really.
Whoever
Dallas
it is.
Turner.
If they play defense, I would have been fine with it.
Yeah, that just made sense. And I was kind of in the boonies out there, so like my service wasn't great. So I was kind of like relying on Twitter when I could get service to see the picks. And like I just saw a collective what the fuck. Like nobody said who they took. but just a collective, like, what is Atlanta doing? And I still wasn't prepared for who the pick was going to be. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who I thought it was going to be, but it was not Michael Penix. It was not a quarterback. Just really, really mind-boggling for a team that you and I both think, I think a lot of people expect to win that division, or at the very least be in the thick of it to win that division.
Honestly, Pat, this pick almost alone has turned me off of picking the Falcons to do anything of note. And that's not because I thought they needed this pick to be the best team in their division. I think they may already be that if Kirk Cousins is what he is. But it shows a level of disorganization within the organization, ironically enough, that I don't trust them to do other things right. And I shit on the pick repeatedly on basically every social platform I could, worded it as many different ways as I possibly could, and I've settled on this pass now that I've had a few weeks to digest it. As concisely as I can put it, it is the Falcons are playing the way they are operating as a franchise. They are operating not to suck. They are not operating to win a Super Bowl. That is all they are doing. Because I mentioned it last week, the fact that Terry Fontenot glossed over the portion of his statement where he was like, yeah, let's say we win for a few years and then, Kirk goes off and because he's too old and then we need a quarterback and we're in purgatory. I'm like, why are you looking ahead to the 4 years from now where you're in quarterback purgatory? If you're looking ahead and you're in quarterback purgatory 4 years from now, but you got 2 Lombardis on your fucking shelf, who cares? If you have 1 on your shelf, who cares? The Falcons have never won a Super Bowl before. But now they have boxed themselves in to a position where if they go these next 4 years, or however long Kirk Cousins is under center, it could be 2 based on the contract. They can essentially get out of it after 2. If they go these 2 years without a ring, or at least getting close to one, that is a failure because they could have used this pick to at least show that they are doing everything they can to win one. Obviously, you're not guaranteeing that you win a Super Bowl just because you draft Dallas Turner at number 8 or you draft Leatu Latu or Jared Verse at number 8, whoever it may be. You don't guarantee that, but you at least show your fans and the NFL world at large that you are doing everything you can to do that. Taking Michael Penix and just saying we are making sure that we don't completely suck in a few years, and also making sure we don't completely suck now, while not going all in at apparently either time, is insane. And it's a terrible look, and it just shows to me that the Falcons will be content if over the entire Kirk Cousins era all they do is win the division a couple times. They'll be happy with that.
And that was the worst possible position they could have picked from. Like, even if they pick one of the wide receivers, it's like, okay, they probably didn't need to do that, but they're loading up for Kirk Cousins. If they took fucking Brock Bowers, it would be like, okay, what the fuck? But they're loading up for Kirk Cousins.
But damn, they got cast.
Or a lineman, or defense, like we said. A quarterback. And Michael Penix, too. Obviously, I'd probably I do like Michael Penix's upside more than J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix. But, it's not like a guy like Drake May or Jaden Daniels fell into their lap and they felt like they had to do it. If that was the case, then I'd be a little more okay with it. But the fact that it's for Michael Penix, who's going to be 29 years old, right? Who knows? Seriously, how old is he? Is he
Penix is 24, so he'll be realistically he'll be 26 or 27 by the time he gets even a chance of sniffing the job. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy, and to do it with an 8th pick. When you've had the 8th pick 3 years in a fucking row now, basically. Yeah. Which shows something that, hey, you guys are as mediocre as it gets when you don't have to be. And they could have really helped themselves get out of that situation. And they didn't. I still think they'll win the division. I still think they have a good enough team. But it's just you are not starting off this new era, the post-Arthur Smith era, very strongly with this pick. This would have been Arthur Smith taking the best blocking tight end to 8th overall, basically.
I also saw something today that added on to it, and it was Terry Fontenot was with the Saints when they got passed up for Patrick Mahomes, because obviously there was a lot of rumors that the Saints wanted Mahomes as a successor to Drew Brees, and they were he wanted to make sure that something like that didn't happen again, so they kept the fact that they liked Penix really close to the vest, this was the plan the whole time, and it very well may have been the plan the whole time, I'm not denying that, but to try to draw a comparison between where the Saints were at that point to where the Falcons are right now, the Saints had an aging Drew Brees on their roster. I don't think that's crazy to try and go up, even obviously not knowing what Patrick Mahomes would become. I don't think that's crazy to try and go up and get, a high upside quarterback and put him behind Drew Brees. It's not the same thing as drafting a quarterback like that the same offseason you bring in an aging quarterback. You didn't have to bring in Kirk.
That's what I mean. And you didn't have to sign him to a 3-year deal? Like the fact that
4 years, $180 million.
Well, 4 years. Not only like they signed some veteran to a blanket contract, maybe even 2 years. Like you committed 4 years to this guy. Like that shows you believe in him. And then it's just like, and I don't think it's that they don't believe in Kirk Cousins. I believe them when they say like, oh, we want Michael Penix for the future. It's like, that's great. That's the future. Like, play for right now. Like, you are in a position to contend, maybe not for the Super Bowl or to even get to the Super Bowl, but you are in a position to contend and move your team forward. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, these great young skill position players, potentially great young skill position players. Just absolutely mind-boggling. My reaction, like, I think I tweeted, like, the Falcons did what? Like,
it's just a bad pick. And I don't think there's any way that, like, there's so many people trying to defend the pick now, and it's like, even if, let's say Michael Penix hits his absolute ceiling, Michael Penix becomes a top 2, top 3 quarterback in the league by the time he finally gets the reins. Even if he does that, that just means the Kirk Cousins signing was the most illogical, weird thing you could have done. Either way, you made a terrible decision because you made 2 decisions within months of each other that do not go together. It would be a little different if Penix was like 2 years younger. It would be a little different, but he's not. And you took a quarterback who is going to be, like you said, 26, 27, 28 when he gets these reins. It's a terrible move. I'm ready to move on from it and just accept that the Falcons are a bad, dumb franchise. And we'll talk about some other stuff.
Also, the Chargers taking Joe Alt was fucking hilarious.
I love that they did it. It's so on brand. I love it.
You kind of called it. I mean, I think we kind of thought that they were going to be above that, and, Malik Neighbors was more than likely going to be there for them, and they just didn't do it. Joe Alt's a great player, don't get me wrong. Like, that's not a bad pick by any means.
No.
It's almost like comparable to when the Bengals took Jamar Chase over Penny Sewell. One, Jamar Chase was probably a better prospect, and two, the Bengals were the more desperate, for a tackle. The Chargers didn't need to do it, and the Chargers were more desperate for a receiver. It's basically like a flip-flop of that situation right now, where it's like, yeah, like you probably didn't need to do it, but so that one was more so just funny. Because, like, when I saw the Giants, like I said, I was kind of out of order. I saw the Giants take Malik Neighbors. I'm like, who the fuck did the Chargers take that? And
Lad McConkey. They did, but later.
They did, yes. And the Raiders, mixed feelings. I like a lot about it. Brock Bowers is a really, really good player. Really good player. Like I said, I think was a better prospect coming into this than Kyle Pitts was a couple of years ago. He is just a force. He's just a force. And to get him at 13 is really good value. That said, they did not need to do it. They absolutely did not need to do it. They did not need, like, Michael Mayer, say what you will about him, he may not be some kind of superstar tight end, but he's serviceable. And that offensive line is porous. Like, this is a team that's going to want to run the ball a lot, too. And, like, so you don't want to commit to running the ball more with some, you've got a second-year running back at the helm. And I know they couldn't get Olu Fashanu. He was gone, but they still could have taken Fatanu from Washington. They could have taken Fuaga from Oregon State. And they just didn't. Like, it was a luxury pick. Like, almost like the Falcons. It was a luxury pick for a team that was not in a position to make a luxury pick. Like, had they not had Michael Mayer even, had they had a little more of a need at tight end, then I'd be more okay with it. But the fact that you had a solid second year tight end, and you go and take Brock Bowers, it's a good weapon for presumably Gardner Minshew. I mean, there's going to be a lot to go around outside of Devontae Adams and then Jacoby Myers in the slot. There's really no other. I guess Trey Tucker kind of showed some stuff at the end of the year, but who really expects him to do anything? So, like, it's just, I'm not really upset about it, but it's just more of a head scratcher. I think it might just be the case where they felt the talent was too good to pass up at 13, which I could see. Like I said, I was really convinced that he was gone at 10. that the Jets were going to
me too.
take him at 10. And, you know, the Jets went with more of a need as well. So, like, I'm not really upset about it. Like, I'm not mad about it. But they just didn't need to. They just didn't need to do it.
No, I get that. I think it is a little different from the Falcons situation in the sense that, you know, the Falcons are a team positioned to contend, so we're watching for them to make a move to put them over the top because everything else they're doing is suggesting to us, oh, they want to win a Super Bowl, whatever. The Raiders are very much not in that position, so I know you're shocked. I almost understand the sentiment of like, let's just get the guy that we think is the best player in this draft and figure the rest out later because we're not going to get a quarterback that we like. We're not going to get, you know, I mean, I guess you could get a lineman, but they probably valued Bowers just, you know, kind of as a prospect overall much higher than anyone else left, as I think a lot of teams did. I think Bowers was probably certainly a top 10 guy overall on teams' boards. There was just a matter of positional need that makes you not take him. So I understand it a little more from that perspective, and I'm definitely interested to see what he does this year. But Pat, we'll see if he ends up on either. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Also, the fact that they were apparently, like, frantically trying to trade up for Michael Penix and, like, Peppa Pig style hung up the phone when the Falcons, like, them and the Saints, and I think there was one other team that were, like, frantically trying to trade up, and then they were just like,
well, never mind. He's going number 8, I guess. Okay, now that we've gone over a couple of these rookies and gotten Pat's initial thoughts on this here draft, we are going to do our draft now of 5 picks each, alternating, trying to put together the best group of 5 immediate contributing fantasy rookies that we can. This is not necessarily dynasty focused, although I guess you could, you know, kind of translate it across that as well. But no, we are focusing on redraft guys we expect to produce for your fantasy team this year, identify them the absolute best that we can. And Pat, I will give you the first pick because I had the first pick last year doing this draft when I took Jahmyr Gibbs. I guess you just wanted to be bold. And again, it worked out okay, but, you know, in the interest of fairness, I will give you the first pick this year, and we will be able to look back at this, you know, once the fantasy season starts, and also a year from now, and see how we did with this one. So I think this one's pretty easy for you to start out, though.
Redraft, dynasty startup, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. There is no question about this. Arizona was about as good of a landing spot in terms of volume. I mean, maybe if he ended up with the Chargers, to get there with Justin Herbert, obviously would have been a better fit, but we like Trey McBride. We're very open Trey McBride supporters here, but besides him, shit, man. My boy Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, like, he is going to be spoon-fed targets in this offense. And, you know, we'll see a full year of Kyler healthy. You know, I think people are kind of overlooking Kyler here. I was kind of doing a rough ranking of the quarterbacks earlier, and like I got around to 9 and 10. I'm like, oh yeah, like Kyler's still got a shot to be a pretty good quarterback here. So it's not like he's going to play with some bum like Malik Neighbors. But excuse me, that was weird. But like if they were in that situation, then I'd be a little more apprehensive. But I don't think Kyler's that. I think that this is the most talented wide receiver prospect we've seen probably since Jamar Chase. And if I'm forgetting somebody, I'm kind of just talking out of my ass, but most talented guy in a good situation where targets will be aplenty, so no question.
No, I mean, that's the easy 101. And for anybody who has listened to our drafts, you know, not that we move through them quickly, but this is going to be one where we move through it probably even a little slower than normal because we're trying to, you know, turn this draft into also just an overall breakdown and talking about each of these players. So as we draft them, we are going to go through and talk about them. And then once we're done, we are also going to talk about the guys who ended up going undrafted and what their outlooks are as well. And maybe, you know, why we left them undrafted. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr., Pat, 100% agree with you. I, as a, you know, fantasy addict, as soon as ESPN kind of opened back up their mock draft lobbies, just for curiosity's sake, I went in there and checked one out. And Marvin Harrison Jr. was sitting there as the 35th overall player. There is not a chance in hell he stays there.
You don't think so? I mean, that's late third in a 12-team league.
Pat, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is not a second-round pick, I think it's a mistake. In PPR leagues, with all the volume he's going to get, how pro-ready he's going to be, and like you said, with a quarterback who is no slouch. Like Kyler Murray's not a guy. Capable. Yeah, Kyler Murray's not a guy I'm expecting to get back to, like, you know, his former glory of us thinking he could be like a top 5 quarterback in the league or whatever. But like Last year, he came back in. He was, obviously showing some signs of rust. And also, in fairness, like we've seen, when we saw Deshaun Watson come in after 3 months and he was rusty, we expected a big step forward the next year and we didn't get it. Maybe the same thing happens to Kyler. I don't know. But either way, I think Kyler is going to do enough to support the clear-cut number one target. And I also think the Deshaun fall-off is just, there's other things at play there too. So I think Kyler will get back to form a little bit here, and he's going to have something to prove, certainly. I think the Cardinals are a team that, under Jonathan Gannon are mostly like trending up. I'm not expecting a big year for them, but I think, they showed a lot of fight last year. They had wins over the Cowboys and the Eagles, and that was with, again, questionable quarterback play all year. Marvin Harrison, to me, like, especially with our league finally switching to PPR this year, I would comfortably take him in the second round, no matter where that second rounder is. That second rounder could be the 13th overall pick. It could be the 24th overall pick. Maybe I'm planting my flag too hard in the guy, but like this is, like you said, it's probably the best, like most pro-ready receiver prospect we've seen come out since Jamar Chase. And these guys, receivers like that, tend to translate pretty well pretty early, and especially when they have no target competition. Like Chase was coming into a situation, he was drafted after T. Higgins, right? Chase was coming into a situation where there was already a very good receiver on that roster. Yes. Marvin Harrison's not coming into that situation. Again, we both love Trey McBride, but that's not the same thing to have a tight end like that versus
room to have for two guys to get targets as well.
Exactly. And, as much as we like Michael Wilson at times last year, it's just not going to be an inhibiting factor to Marvin Harrison being a monster. Like it wouldn't shock me in the slightest for Marvin Harrison Jr. to finish as a top 5 fantasy receiver in his rookie year. So I am very much all in on him. If there's no way his ADP stays at 35. I think at the very least he'll end up being an early third rounder. But I really do expect it to end up being in the second when it's all said and done. So definitely a clear, number one pick.
Trendy rookie as well.
Yeah, that too. So outside of like the logical part of it, there's also the illogical part of people just being like, oh, it's a rookie. Like this could have been anyone, and I would have, loved to take the pick there. But yes, number one pick.
Yeah.
Clear number one pick in our fantasy rookie draft. With my number one pick and the number 2 overall pick, I am between a couple of guys here. It's really only 2 guys.
No clue what I would do with this pick. So I'm glad you got it.
I'm really only between 2. But I am gonna go. I'm worried about who you're gonna take with your next pick. I think having the number 1 pick in this thing is really an advantage this year. I feel like. I'll take Malik Neighbors.
Fuck.
I'm gonna take. Partially because I don't want you to have both of the top tier, obviously great receivers, but also, so Malik Neighbors is a guy, and any astute listeners will recall, because I believe I talked about him last week, how I wasn't super high on him just because of Daniel Jones, and I realized that's probably overreacting a little bit. Looking at Malik Neighbors and looking at his skill set, and more importantly, looking at the offensive coordinator in New York, don't forget Mike Kafka was a guy who we were praising pretty recently for his creative play calling just 2 years ago when Daniel Jones had that career year, which for him was only 15 passing touchdowns. But overall, the offense was really good, and he was running for a bunch of touchdowns. And I just recall one specific play that made me tweet about Mike Kafka, where it was like Daniel Bellinger fucking in the backfield, and there's a lot of shit going on. Kafka's a really creative guy. And I think this team is going to know what they have in a player that they spent the number 6 overall pick on. I think they are going to absolutely feed Malik Neighbors targets. I think they're going to make it where, even as limited as Daniel Jones is, he's going to be able to catch balls from Daniel Jones on screens, slants, whatever they are. It doesn't have to require this sort of precision downfield accuracy all the time, but we know Jones can deliver those as well. We've seen Darius Slayton, catch deep bombs week in and week out for no apparent reason. I just think the talent is too great and the depth chart is too thin for me to not believe in him despite Daniel Jones. And even though I may be the Daniel Jones number 1 hater, I mean, hate the way he walks, hate the way he talks, I can understand and maybe even leverage that in drafts, because if other people get scared off by how just trash Daniel Jones is, I'll take the guy who's going to get 10, 11, 12 targets in a game from him, and, have them be manufactured touches that an explosive player can really make work. So I think Malik Neighbors, not as much of a slam dunk and certainly likely to be a little more inconsistent than Marvin Harrison, but I think definitely a guy that you won't be upset to have as your wide receiver 2 on fantasy teams.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors would have been my pick here. Like you said, we can worry about Daniel Jones, but this is the same guy 2 years ago who I guess kind of warranted that huge extension. He at least played well enough to make that as an option, whether it was the correct one or not. And same thing, like Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, they led this team to the playoffs 2 years ago. So unless they are really as dreadful as they were for a stretch last year, like Malik Neighbors is going to be the focal point. Like we talked about Marvin Harrison being the focal point. Malik Neighbors is going to be even more so the focal point. You look at that depth chart, Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt. It's a lot of guys that don't really do much for you. You're like, oh, sure, maybe, but they're just a bunch of guys that you'll see on the waiver wire every week that you're like, oh, maybe this guy. And the ghost of Darren Waller, whatever's left of him, like...
Well, he retired officially, so he's gone.
Oh, he officially retired?
He did. That was part of, I think while you were gone, he finally, after waffling, did retire. Let me make sure it was concrete.
I got divorced, so Kelsey Plum, call me, but...
Yeah, oh, God. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, so from The Athletic, Giants tight end Darren Waller opens up on retirement consideration. Okay, it could go either direction. I was wrong. Excuse me. I could have swore I saw confirmation. So still around, but
yeah, that's what I thought.
Pat, either he's retiring or he's checked out enough because he's considering retiring, and also he wasn't really a factor last year. So, yeah, sorry. I guess it's not confirmed yet, but still on the tape.
Yeah, so whether it's him, whether it's Daniel Bellinger, not worried. But that's the thing. Take Daniel Jones in or out of the equation, whatever. This guy's going to get so many targets, and like you said, such an explosive player. You can make him work in so many different ways. I think he is the pick here, especially since, like you said, there was an obvious number 1. There's not an obvious number 2. And, the next wide receiver that got taken off the board, I might go undrafted in this, to be completely...
Oh, I'm not taking him.
I'm not taking him either. I may take him really late if so.
No.
Sorry,
no.
Rome,
Again, reminder that this is for redraft specifically. Rome Odunze is simply not a guy that I'm going to be interested in redraft, and we'll talk about him once we get to the undrafted segment of this little episode here. But yeah, it's hard to have any real excitement about him in fantasy his rookie year, considering how buried he is right now.
Oh, God, this is tough. I think I might be pulling for a guy who was not taken particularly high. Debating between a couple of guys here.
I got to find,
This guy not even drafted in the first round. No, he wasn't.
I should upload Who Wants to Be a Millionaire waiting music.
That would be bold as shit for me to take a guy that did not even get taken in the first round.
I don't think that's that bold. I think there were guys in the second round, a couple of them actually, that ended up in much better situations than guys in the first round and play much more fantasy relevant positions than a lot of guys drafted in the first. There were a lot of quarterbacks drafted in the first, and flat out, that's a hard position sometimes to translate to fantasy.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to go with the first pick of the second round, and I'm going to go Keon Coleman in Buffalo here.
Okay.
I may not think he's quite as talented as a guy like Brian Thomas, who was the guy that I was kind of deciding between, but I think that opportunity in Buffalo in such a good offense, conceivably, under Joe Brady. Josh Allen's Josh Allen. He's going to throw the ball to somebody. Stephon Diggs is gone. Your boy Gabe Davis is gone. They've got Khalil Shakir in the slot and Curtis Samuel. And I'm a big, like I said, all in on Dalton Kincaid this year. But still, like we said, plenty of room to go around. For him to effectively have the potential to be the number 1 wide receiver in that offense this early on in the game is huge. And I think that combined, he's not going to kill you with speed. But, I feel like they got guys like Khalil Shakir who might, or Curtis Samuel, more of this gadget gizmo kind of guy. They kind of just need a straight-up wide receiver on the outside. And I think that's what Keon Coleman is. And, I'm surprised he went after some of these guys that went right at the end of the there are 3 guys that went right before him to end the first round, and honestly, I probably would have had Keon Coleman go before all of them if I was a GM. But the opportunity here is too much to pass up on. We've already reached murky waters in the second round of this, which is not good. But yeah, we'll go Keon Coleman here.
Yeah, Keon Coleman measuring in at 6'4", 215. Then you've got Khalil Shakir, 6 feet, 190, and Curtis Samuel, 5'11", 195. So you definitely have a different archetype here. The kind of guy who's going to be your prototypical when you think of a go up and get it end zone receiver. And in an offense like this, the guy who is more suited to catch balls in the end zone, I think, is definitely a solid bet. Like you said, not going to kill you with speed, but he is a big dude, super athletic, and I would agree. My concern with Coleman, and it's not a major concern. I think he is just as valid of a sort of late-ish round pick for a couple, first couple spots on your bench type of pick in a 12-teamer. Is I could see there being some games where he's 40 yards and a touchdown, 30 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I mean, you're okay with that if he gets the 2 or the 1. But I feel like there's a risk of him not racking up a ton of yards just because of some of those other guys.
Yeah.
Khalil Shakir,
too.
They ran the ball a lot. Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel are kind of built to eat up yards when they are healthy, even though they may not have big noses for the end zone. But either way, that's also really pure speculation on my part. Keon Coleman could just translate as being Josh Allen's new best friend. I mean, he's going to have all the opportunity in the world to do that. We'll see if he earns his trust and how much he earns it and how well he earns it. And I'm with you. I think that is as valid of a pick as you can make here in the, I guess, theoretical second round of our draft. My pick here, I think I'm also going to stay on the receiver realm and also dip into the second round here.
God damn it, he's doing it.
Oh, I mean, Pat. He's
damn
the first one in and the last one to leave. He's a real gym rat. I gotta go with Ladd McConkey for my second pick.
Damn it.
Ladd McConkey, much different build, obviously, than a guy like Keon Coleman, but stepping into very much the same situation where there's basically as much opportunity as you want to go out and grab, because this Chargers team, we talked about it in the weeks leading up to the draft, we thought could or very well should draft a receiver with their 5th overall pick. We thought that could be Neighbors or even Odunze. Turns out they went tackle. Someone's got to catch this ball from Justin Herbert. And Ladd McConkey, with how, again, these are going to be more white guy stereotypes, but how cerebral he approaches the game, he's going to find those open spots on the field. And I think he's quickly going to become, like a safety blanket, safety valve plus for Justin Herbert. And we certainly have joked about how the Chargers are just not going to throw the ball, literally ever. No, they're still going to throw the ball a decent amount. And when they do, I mean, again, I could very easily see 100+ targets over the course of the season going to Ladd McConkey. The guys he's competing with on this depth chart, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson. Sure, my camera's just going to go ahead and die. So early. Yeah, for him to be competing with those guys, and if Quentin Johnston doesn't take a step forward, Ladd McConkey may be the only one Justin Herbert throws to. There are just not established, at least not established above average players in this receiving core. Palmer will get some, sure, he's fine. They signed DJ Chark, cool. But Ladd McConkey, all the opportunity in the world here. And when it comes to fantasy, especially in their rookie years, opportunity is all you're looking for, and I think you're hard-pressed to find a rookie other than maybe Marvin Harrison and I guess Malik Neighbors, but I could see McConkey having similar target totals to one of those guys by the end of the year. It really wouldn't shock me.
It really wouldn't. I didn't know how early he would go in this, but he was on my radar really pretty early here too. Like you said, they're throwing the ball to stone hands Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer, who is one of the biggest one-game darlings. Every year it happens. And they didn't. It's not even like they went out and got a tight end. I'd argue they downgraded at tight end, going from Gerald Everett to Hayden Hurst and Donald
Will
Parham,
Dissly.
XFL darling.
Will Dissly
Will
too.
Dissly.
Don't forget. Put some respect.
And they've got Gus Edwards, who does not catch the ball out of the backfield. Greg Roman does not throw the ball to running backs in the backfield. There are so many targets to go around, and unless you really believe in that Quentin Johnston year 2 leap, I mean, like, who was the? Oh God, I feel like there was someone their rookie year that just had the dropsies all the time, and then they figured it out. I think that was Jamar Chase, but just in the preseason for some reason.
It was, yeah. Well, it was the rumor that he couldn't see the ball because the laces were different or whatever the fuck.
Unless you really see, like, I'd be more concerned about a guy that's got the dropsies than a guy who, might need to improve his route running a little more, get more physical, or more burst off the line of scrimmage. I'd rather have a wide receiver who needs to improve on that year 2 than a guy who just can't fucking catch the ball.
Well, the fact is, wide open drops are a mental thing, and like that is always a risk of popping back up. Like it's always a risk, and we have seen guys overcome that at times. I mean, Deontay Johnson, Pat, I don't know if you remember that one specific game where he just had the yips. So it is possible to overcome. Deontay, you haven't really heard much about him and drops on a consistent basis since then, but it's still just like you said, that's not the flaw you want to see. Like if you're going to see a flaw, you'd rather it probably be something else other than, you did everything right and then you couldn't catch the wide open pass.
Exactly. So like I'm at least not expecting a big enough leap from Quentin Johnston for Ladd McConkey to not be a factor, especially since he's exclusively in a slot. You're not going to see this guy outside, maybe at all. 0 snaps outside of the slot. So, and they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. They've still got a really talented quarterback in Justin Herbert who, isn't going to be content just stuffing the ball into Gus Edwards' man boobs 25 times a game. He's going to want to throw the ball some. So, a good pick there, definitely. I kind of teased my pick in Brian Thomas. I'm going to pivot. Because, I think I'm going to take the only guy here, honestly, worth a damn at this position. Like, I wouldn't draft anyone else at this position here. I think he is the only running back that truly has the ability to be the guy on his own volition, and the rest of these guys we will talk about later are more injury dependent. I'm going to go Jonathan Brooks here in Carolina. Just from a talent perspective, he is the most talented guy in that backfield. Granted, Chuba Hubbard looked good last year. Chuba Hubbard, on a really bad offense, Chuba Hubbard brought out some really solid games there. And whatever's left of Miles Sanders, like, I'm not particularly worried about that. And like I said, the biggest thing for me is just the fact that, like, the running back position is just, I think he's the only guy that's really going to have a shot to go and get it, as opposed to guys like Blake Corum, who, or Trey Benson, but are probably going to need an injury to get in there. We'll see what the Panthers offense does under Dave Canales here in year 2 under Bryce Young. Gotta think there's going to be some improvement, plenty of room for improvement. Again, like we kind of said with the Cardinals, I'm not expecting some kind of meteoric leap that the Texans had, but you'd think there's going to be some progression in that offense in general. And if, volume's volume, and if this guy is the starting running back definitively, especially towards the end of the year, you've got here on our show sheet that he's more of a second half darling league winner. I think he could be more. I think he could be more than that. I think he could be a guy that helps you a majority of the season. So with the scarcity at the position there, I will go with who I thought was the best running back in the draft, Jonathan Brooks.
No, and I agree with you that wasn't meant to be like, that's all he is, and you have to suffer through,
course,
the first half of the season with him or the first half of the fantasy season. He could certainly contribute early. I just think regardless of what he does early, I think he's going to be a league winner in the second half of the year. Sure. It'll be interesting where he ends up getting picked come fantasy draft time, because there are question marks about his readiness and his workload early on. Ian Rappaport is reporting that he is expected to be ready to go by July 1st, which gives him, 2 months until the start of the regular season, which in theory is plenty of time. So there's a non-zero chance that he is could get a full workload week 1. It sounds like the Panthers aren't necessarily going to do that, and they are a team that, because of how Chuba Hubbard played last year, probably do have the luxury to not have to really throw him to the wolves, especially since they're not expected to compete this year. Bring along your potential running back of the future, if that's such a thing, because their shelf life is like 3 years. Bring along your potential running back of the future slowly, and get him acclimated, get him comfortable coming off that injury. And again, even if they want to give him a full workload right off the bat, like it could take him a little bit to get his confidence back coming off of, the ACL. It's always a thing of, can you trust your own limbs again? It's a mental hurdle for guys to get over. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But yes, I think Jonathan Brooks is, you're 100% right, the only one who has a chance to really go out and just get it himself.
Yeah.
Because
like
these other
Nate
guys
said
will
here
need
in
injuries.
the chat, when I meant injury dependent, I mean they need an injury to be the guy.
Yeah.
Not that Blake Corum is going to be dependent on whether or not he gets hurt. I guess that's everybody, but yeah. Like, he would need Kyron Williams to go down. Like, Gus Edwards would need to go down, or James Conner for some of these rookies to get in there. I think Brooks can just go and take it based on his own talent. And you think, what incentive is Carolina going to have to trot out Chuba Hubbard at the end of the year if they're not good again? And they're trying to build up Jonathan Brooks and get him as many reps as possible there. So
it gives me big Breece Hall vibes from this past season, where it was like they brought him along slowly, and then at a certain point they were like, all right, the reins are off. And especially once the Jets ended up not, competing like they had initially thought they were going to, it gave them even more of a reason to just kind of run him out there and get him, fully comfortable and fully acclimated again. But yeah, I'm with you. Jonathan Brooks is maybe the only rookie running back that will be like super consistent, or could be super consistent week to week. And we'll talk about guys like Trey Benson and Blake Corum, because I don't think they have no value without an injury. It's just the sense of we are trying to draft the best, immediate contributors. And I think those guys' ceilings, if James Conner and Kyron Williams are both healthy, are more of like flex plays, if anything. So we're trying to get some guys with a little bit more upside there. I say that I may very well end up drafting one of them in the last round of this before it's all said and done. We'll see. But now that you've taken Jonathan Brooks off the board, Pat, I will go to the quarterback position. And I'm going to go to Caleb Williams. I think.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I know.
First.
You've got, certainly understand that. You've got Jaden Daniels sitting here. He has the much more fantasy-friendly skill set with how much he's going to run the ball. I just think you're hard-pressed to find a rookie quarterback, stepping into a better weapons-related situation than Caleb Williams is going to be. He is stepping into his first snap in the NFL, assuming no one gets hurt in the preseason, is going to be with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift as his weapons. Like, and they've done some work to try to improve the O-line. I'm sure it's still not going to be great, but Caleb is a guy who's going to be, I think, mobile enough to kind of tack on, some of those yards. And also, I say mobile enough, Pat. This actually shocked me, and I'm gonna look up the stats really quick just so I can confirm it. At USC last year, I feel like I did not hear enough about this at all, but when I was researching it, I was shocked. Caleb Williams rushed for 11 touchdowns last year. 11, and then 10 the year prior. Like, this is not a guy who is incapable of kind of having, maybe not a Josh Allen rushing total, because Allen racks up a lot of yards too, but could certainly rack up Josh Allen touchdown totals if he wants. And our boy DeAndre Swift is very much used to getting vultured, unfortunately. So that's, I think, well within his skill set. And also, he could be a super, super viable passer in his rookie year with, again, as good of a supporting cast as you could really ask for. I just thought back to, last year with C.J. Stroud, and obviously C.J. Stroud is much more an exception than something that pops up every year that you can be like, oh, who's the next C.J. Stroud? But thinking back to how he got his points, it was because the Texans had such an unexpectedly really good group of receivers, and that was it. And Caleb Williams has that and a lot more mobility than C.J. Stroud, or at least a lot more willing mobility than C.J. Stroud. I think Stroud could move if he really wanted to, but Caleb's a guy who clearly is, willing to run those in when he wants to. And it feels like I hate to call a rookie in fantasy football safe, but it's like, if this guy is even 80% of the prospect that we think he can be with these kind of weapons, I mean, how do you fail? So I'm going to go with Caleb Williams here.
That's the thing here is that Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles, their seats are on fire. Like, their seats are so hot. We may talk about that in a fewer questions. Spoiler alert, but they needed to set up Caleb Williams. Ryan Poles said, okay, we're moving on from Justin Fields. We're not moving on from Matt Eberflus. We're going to give this regime an opportunity with Caleb Williams, and they know they need to do this, and they have set him up for as much success as possible. Granted, the Adunze pick, I feel like a lineman might have been the move there, but like already at that point, Alt and Latham were off the board. You know, it might have been a slight. I mean, Fashanu went 11th anyway, but like still, maybe they didn't think he was the fit there. But again, you're building for the future there as well, because who knows how much longer Grandpa Keenan Allen can, hang out there.
Guy's only like 30.
Yeah. but yeah, just the fact that one, he's more talented than Jaden Daniels. He's obviously got that. That's why he went ahead of him. And the situation he has, just the just the natural ability. And like you said, he is no slouch. He is no slouch running the football. I see this, I'm higher on Williams than I was Stroud last year. Let's just put it that way. I was higher on...
No one was high on Stroud.
I was
one,
higher
not for
on
fantasy.
Williams last year. Hindsight's 20/20 with Anthony Richardson. But I feel like it's very close. And for a traditional pocket passer to have that kind of belief in you in year one here, it's saying something. It's saying something. And, we've talked about this guy as, the best prospect since Trevor Lawrence, who was the best prospect since Andrew Luck, who was the best. Mm-hmm. He's the best prospect since Andrew Luck, not Trevor, you bum. But yeah, Caleb Williams is fair. Like I said, I wouldn't have. In a dynasty league, I did pick Caleb. I had the third pick, and I did take Caleb over. I think it might have been the fifth pick. Fifth pick. I took Caleb over Jaden Daniels. But obviously, again, this is for just this year. But yeah, I think this guy's going to be a stud, and I do think we're going to see him be a very viable quarterback this year. And I wonder what he's going to be drafted as, in terms of is he, or obviously, I don't know if you've looked at the quarterback depth chart, but it's pretty good. I think there are really good. 15-ish viable QB1s. So I feel like if you're going to draft one of the rookies and pair him with a safer pick, this is the year to do it. Mm-hmm. So I can kind of see this as a 10th, 11th round pick maybe with Williams here. But I don't know if I'll be willing to bite on that in this situation. But
that's fair. That is fair.
All right. Might as well go and take Jaden Daniels off the board here then, even though you might not have picked him because you just picked the quarterback. But
I might have, just to get the overall picture.
Yeah, we're not building a team. We're just picking the best players here. But obviously the rushing upside is the reason why I prefer him to Williams for this year. Similar scary offense, does not quite have the weapons. I mean, what he's got, friend of the Off the Bench podcast, Austin Eckler, and Brian Robinson, who is no longer the most recent NFL skill position player to be shot. And then obviously Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. We fucking hope Jahan Dotson makes this leap that everybody wanted him to make so badly last year. But again, no slouch. And Benson at tight end, we'll maybe talk. Well, we'll talk about him at some point. But that rushing upside combined with the fact that we'll see this Cliff Kingsbury offense. Cliff Kingsbury loves to light it up. We saw what he tried to do with Kyler Murray. And Daniels has obviously got some similar skill sets. With better size. So I think the tools are there. The offense, the team scares me, but it's a new coaching staff. So we don't really know. We can't kind of look into it and be like, oh, he's on Ron Rivera's staff and it's a miserable offense. No, that's not the case. So I don't like him as much as I liked Richardson last year, because I think Richardson had more of that home run ability that we clearly saw from him before he sadly got hurt. Rookie or not, I would still much rather have Richardson next year, in this coming year, than Daniels. I still don't value Daniels as a QB1, and I feel like if he is a guy you take, you have to go and take a Kirk Cousins or a Trevor Lawrence or a Tua. Crazy that a couple of those guys probably not going to be drafted in the top 12 quarterbacks, despite being top 7 or 8 last year.
Yeah, let's pull up the initial quarterback rankings just to get a full picture here. So, I mean, you've got, I'll just go in order here. You've got, according to ESPN, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson at 6, CJ Stroud at 7, Dak Prescott at 8, Kyler Murray at 9, then Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Aaron Rodgers, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins. Pat, Justin Herbert's QB 16. Like, Trevor Lawrence is QB 17, and I know Trevor wasn't very good last year, but, like, I'm still not totally out on him. It's the QB depth is...
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you really... Yeah. I'm a big fan of punting the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Where did I take
this might be...
I took Trevor last year, like, middle quarterback. I love punting the quarterback position more than anybody.
You do.
And I
this
damn
might be
well
the year
will.
to do it.
This is a great year to do it, and, did you even say Kirk Cousins' name?
I barely. He was right before Herbert at QB 15.
Jeez, so like that's what I mean. You're getting good value here, but so if you want to go and take Daniels or Williams, who I'm a bit surprised or that high. Obviously, I think does Daniels have more upside this year than Justin Herbert? I mean,
I
just the
so.
Chargers'
I mean,
offense is scary, man.
Jaden Daniels was literally a 1,000-yard rusher last year. Like that's not nothing. So
yeah,
and a 40 touchdown passer, which he won't be with the Commanders. But
the fact
still.
that we're talking about Justin Herbert as a potential kind of fallback option at quarterback,
handcuff,
is
Herbert,
insane. So and we're not even looking about the fact that Justin Fields could potentially very well go into the season as a starting quarterback with all of his rushing upside as well.
Neither Neither Steelers quarterback is currently listed in the top 25.
As they shouldn't be. So
yeah.
But we're talking about a really deep position. We haven't gone on a tangent because this is relevant. We're talking about how effective these guys are going to be, where you can get them. So the rushing upside, I like Daniels just a little bit better. But again, if we come back at the end of the year and Williams outperform Daniels, you're not going to see me be very surprised.
Yeah. Okay. This is where we start to get a little jankier, and I don't exactly know who I want to pick for immediate contributions. Man, I think I might. I might do it. All right. I'm going to take Brock Bowers. I think
I wasn't going to. Yeah.
Brock Bowers certainly did not go to an ideal fantasy situation. Not as ideal as places he was mocked to early in the process, New York, Los Angeles. But I still think, and again, this is almost similar to me about the like Malik Neighbors discount you could get because of Daniel Jones as the quarterback. I think there's a slight discount you might be able to get on Brock Bowers because he went to a place that, one, has another pretty good tight end, has no discernible quarterback, and has a clear wide receiver one already. But with all of that said, I still think Brock Bowers, if I was a betting man, I would say will finish second on this team in targets. Now, whatever that number looks like, I'm not sure. But I could very much see him finishing second on this team in targets, and it's just a bet on the talent. Like there will be some rough weeks because of the quarterback situation, I'm sure, but Pat, at the tight end position, what the fuck else is new? Like, this is a guy who is going to have blow up games strictly because of his talent, and I am okay with that if I get him, outside of those top few elite tight ends. And just for posterity's sake, let's see where ESPN has him as a tight end. Yeah, ESPN has him right now as tight end 13. Now, I think if he went to a different situation, if he went to LA with Justin Herbert, we're probably looking at tight end 7 or 8, if I had to guess. Right behind
him is my tight end 13.
Right behind Kittle and Ingram and that kind of. But right now he is behind, and I think probably rightfully so, behind most of these guys. But you've got we'll start at 9. 9 is Kyle Pitts. I'd rather have Pitts than Bowers. 10 is Jake Ferguson. I don't think I'd rather have Jake Ferguson than Bowers. I don't think I would. Dallas Goedert, it's close. I don't think I'd rather have Goedert.
I'm not a huge Goedert. I actually do. I don't think I have Goedert. Yeah, I have Goedert as my... Holy shit, I've got it as my tight end 15.
I mean, that's not far off. It's 4 spots down. And then TJ Hawkinson is the one directly ahead of Bowers. TJ Hawkinson's hurt. Injury, but like if it factors in injury and he's still above Bowers. So like I don't agree with that. I think Bowers, there's some value to be had there. And again, it's one of those things where it's like we've had all these different circumstances now come into play with Brock Bowers that have hurt his value, and that it's kind of, I feel, taking people away from the simple part of it, which is he's really fucking good at football.
Yeah.
Just take the gamble on that. And so that's why I'm going to go with him here in the 4th round.
But I feel like this is like the Bart Simpson say the line meme, and it's just like the tight end position is deeper than ever.
Yeah.
Because look at it.
It's true.
Looking
It is true.
at the tight ends today, like there are 14 or 15 guys that I think like are realistic tight end ones here. And that's counting Hawkinson,
Yep.
who's not going to finish as a tight end one, probably just because of the games he might miss. But I mean, like, I'd have Hawkinson at tight end 4. If Hawkinson was healthy,
sure,
going all the way through here, I'd have him at tight end 4. But I don't know. I'm not quite as high on Bowers just because I also just don't trust the passing volume of this offense with Gardner Minshew or the second hottest AOC under center. Or sorry, first. She's not as hot as Nancy Pelosi though. We got to make sure we got to make sure we. We've
Hillary
just been
too.
canceled, unfortunately. I figured Nancy Pelosi
liberal
would do
bench
it,
mob.
but yeah. Whoops. God, talk about woke. Go to Portland, man. Jeez. But where the fuck am I talking? I'm talking about the Raiders. I'm talking about Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how Portland. Okay, back it up. Whether it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell under center, I don't trust this offense to have a crazy passing volume. And you've got Devontae Adams, who is going to command a massive target share. And you've got Jacoby Myers, who they clearly like in the slot. But like I said, besides that, all bets are off for after that. So I think Bowers is at worst the number 3 target in this offense. Maybe number 2, but even if he's number 2, it's like, I don't know if that's good enough in this offense. Again, you bet on the talent. You draft Brock Bowers. Again, I think this is another year where if you want to take kind of a blanket guy to go with him, decent year to do it. Get a guy like Dallas Goedert. Get a guy like Cole Kmet or David Njoku or Dalton Schultz or Luke Musgrave. Take someone else with him.
Yeah.
But I'm just not quite nearly as bullish on Bowers as you or really everyone. Like I said, I was surprised when I looked early and saw he was tight end 13. Like, basically tight end 1, and I don't quite jive with that, but like you said, the talent's there. In theory, the opportunity is there. And then you can't count out Michael Mayer. Like, I don't know if they're just going to say, like, I don't want to play with you anymore Toy Story meme.
I did literally see that meme with Michael Mayer.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, that could happen, conceivably.
I think they're just both going to be on the field a lot together. So I don't think it's going to be
especially since
yeah.
they're probably going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. They're probably going to run the ball a lot, but it's a Beer White season. But like I said, I wasn't going to take him here just because I don't know. I mean, it's nice for us to get to talk about a tight end here when, like I said, there's not going to be another. Spoiler alert.
Right.
Unless you're going to pull off the upset of the century.
Theo Johnson season, baby. Yeah. Unironically think he's a nice dart throw, but no.
All right, I feel like I said Brian. Like, I almost took Brian Thomas with my second pick. And now here we are in the last
I'm not
round.
a Brian Thomas guy. I'm sure you could see my note on him here. I'm
a bit
I'm not
more,
in on him.
But there's somebody else that I'll take Brian Thomas over,
okay, talk yourself
over
into
my
it.
guy just because I think this guy Thomas has a much better floor than, spoiler alert, than Xavier Worthy, who would have been the other guy I would have taken here. There are a decent amount of mouths to feed in this offense with Gabe Davis, with Christian Kirk, with Evan Engram, but Kirk is almost exclusively in the slot. And we've talked about Gabe Davis here. I don't know if he's a guy that commands a whole lot of target share. Like,
Gabe Davis commands my fucking fist in his face.
I think that Brian Thomas is going to be on the field a lot. And again, in an offense where this team's got a lot of pressure on him. Year 3 under Doug Peterson after really underwhelming last year, especially in that terrible ending stretch of the season. it's a make or break for Trevor Lawrence here. What they picked up his option, of course, but like
21 touchdowns, 14 interceptions for Lawrence last year in 16
and we thought
games.
this was going to be an
Not good.
electric offense. Like,
Couldn't have been more wrong.
Like, we loved you in particular loved the Lawrence Ridley stack, and we were way wrong. It was Travis
Thank
Etienne
God.
season, baby. If you love Travis Etienne, which we didn't, you'd be great. But you've got to think that this offense will bounce back to some extent. And, they don't have the Calvin Ridley there to get either 1 or 10 targets a game. Will Brian Thomas be that guy? No, I think Gabe Davis is going to be that guy. So almost similarly to like you said with Bowers, I do think there may be some weeks where Thomas may be a non-factor. But I think just the fact that you are getting, a solid wide receiver who was a solid prospect going to a team who needed a wide receiver, who has been in talks about Brandon Ayuk and so. And, even though there is Christian Kirk and Evan Engram and Gabe Davis and whoever, that doesn't quite scare me off from him quite as much as you, at least.
I can understand that. I look at a guy and I see a guy whose ceiling theoretically is third best target on an offense that has struggled. And not only that, third best target on an offense that has struggled, and a guy whose skill set is a little bit redundant to Gabe Davis. Now, coming into the league as a rookie, I think there's definitely the chance he ends up better than Gabe Davis. I fucking hate Gabe Davis, and I don't think he's very good. So I think there's definitely a chance Thomas ends up a better, more well-rounded player, but he is a guy who his weakness right now as a prospect has been considered his hands. And I mean, you can work on that and clean that up, but if that is going to be an issue now, and you're already a little behind the 8 ball in terms of possible playing time, that's the only reason I'm not in on him as a fantasy asset. He's a guy I could see his name popping up on Sundays every once in a while as being a very, useful NFL player for the Jaguars to maybe get Trevor Lawrence where he wants to be, chip in 5-6 touchdowns here over the course of the season. Who knows? But just a guy who... There are other guys who I feel are better bets for fantasy relevance in their rookie season. And with that said, Pat, we've gone not chalk here with our picks, but we haven't selected
Drake May.
We haven't we haven't selected anyone that is a surprise as far as the top 10 most fantasy
There was
relevant
a lot
people.
more guys taken early here.
Right. So let me cook here for my final pick. With my final pick here, Pat, what team in the NFL drafts wide receivers better than any other team? Do you know off the top of your head?
The Kansas City Chiefs. Take the kid from the Steelers.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to take Roman Wilson.
Yeah,
Roman Wilson.
He was on my radar, didn't have enough picks for him.
Yeah, the Steelers, man, those fuckers know how to find receivers in the second and third round. I mean, I think I went over it last week, but just to name a few, Deontay Johnson, Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown in the 6th. They identify talent at the receiver position. And more importantly, he is stepping into in theory, starting role in that depth chart. It's after they got rid of Deontay Johnson. It is basically just George Pickens and Roman Wilson now. Let me see who the other name even is starting for them right now listed. It is Van Jefferson. Now, I know Arthur Smith loves him some Van Jefferson, but that is not a player I'm expecting to really be that they're scheming anything around. Roman Wilson's player comp is Jaden Reed, so that's the style of player he is, and we saw how productive Jaden Reed was able to be in his rookie year, and I think Roman Wilson, if he's going to be able to be a guy who operates in that short field and, gets used on gadget plays like that, that is an incredibly invaluable skill set for either quarterback that ends up under center for the Steelers. Russell Wilson, who, may need to take what's given to him a little bit more often, and Justin Fields, who is, I think, same thing. I mean, they're going to have to keep it simple for these two quarterbacks whose just skill sets have not allowed them to be like super elite players at their position, in Russ's case anymore, or in Fields' case at all, passing-wise. I just think Roman Wilson profiles as a guy who's going to make either Wilson or Fields' job a lot easier. And so I could see them getting him a decent enough target share that He could be a flex guy. I don't think Roman Wilson's going to turn into a wide receiver too, just much like Jaden Reed didn't. But he was a guy that you were pretty damn happy to have in your flex on a weekly basis.
Close, yeah.
He was pretty close. I think second half of the year he actually was like a wide receiver one almost production wise. But it was a guy that when you put him in, you kind of felt weird about it and that it just paid off every time. But Roman Wilson's a guy who I could very much see squeaking his way into fantasy relevance his rookie year, and just too many dots kind of line up for him. And it makes me feel pretty good about him. Yeah, so I guess that wraps it up for the actual draft itself. To recap, and so we can, it was not brief. We'll wrap it up and to go over, the picks that we will then recap in a few months and also a year from now and see who looks stupid. Pat's 5 are Marvin Harrison Jr., Keon Coleman, Jonathan Brooks, Jaden Daniels, and Brian Thomas Jr. My 5 are Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, Caleb Williams, Brock Bowers, and Roman Wilson. So, pick which one of us you want to ride with and draft those rookies in your draft if you can. Obviously, I like the guys Pat picked. He likes the guys I picked, so it's not mutually exclusive in that sense. But pick what flag you want to plant.
The wide receiver that went 9th overall.
It's Pat, after watching what JSN did last year and with literally the same OC that was there with JSN last year, it's kind of hard to Am I mistaken?
Tufts offensive coordinator Shane Waldron?
Yes, I am. I don't think he was Tufts offensive coordinator Shane Waldron.
You should have been.
Tufts graduate.
You should have been.
Yes, Shane Waldron. And look, JSN was another guy. And look, maybe like, I don't think the Bowers pick will bite me in the ass because of this, but like maybe it does bite me in the ass because we thought the same thing with JSN, where it was like, he's just too good. Like, they're going to get him on the field. They'll figure it out. And I'm just hoping it's different because their positions are different, but it's like looking at JSN and Rome Odunze, it's hard to envision there being enough for Rome Odunze to be relevant on a week-to-week basis. He's going to need an injury, and if we do get a Keenan Allen injury, he might be fucking awesome, but we're not talking about hypothetical injuries right now. I think we kind of thought the same thing last year with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. One of them's always hurt, so JSN will get, and he didn't ever really get an extended look as a full-time player, or at least with a full-time sort of complement of targets. It's hard to feel good about Rome Odunze. Definitely the highest capital player that we left off of our teams here, but I think rightfully so. It's really hard to think anything else. Pat, we'll run through the quarterbacks real quick. We'll run through each position real quick and just touch on some of these guys. So Drake May, I think there's a chance he ends up fantasy relevant at the middle of the season, but again, it's just right now, you look at betting on him compared to these other guys. First of all, not a guarantee he starts week 1. I think Daniels and Williams are guarantees that they start week 1.
I think Drake May, 2 others that are too.
Well, yeah, you're right. Bo Nix is also going to,
I think
probably.
McCarthy and Nix are probably going to be starting. I also think May
so
is too. I think
you
May
think so?
is going to as well. I do too, yeah. I think there's going to be 5 of them.
Really? Okay. I could see it. I'm just looking at it. Depending on how camp looks, would I be shocked if the Broncos did a weird thing and started Zach Wilson and then realized they were wrong? Not really, but maybe that's just... No, maybe that's just my lack of faith in the Broncos. But no, if I was a betting man, I would bet on all of those guys to start, except Drake May. I think I would bet on Brissett to come out there and start for a little bit. But
I'd say
as far
as 5, I'm least confident in him. Out of the 5 to start.
As far as May's potential fantasy relevance, I mean, you look at him and you have a skill set that is very kind of Herbert-esque. You've got the big arm. You've got Drake May's a little more mobile than Herbert, so he could potentially chip in some rushing touchdowns if and when he does become the starter. The question with Drake May is going to be the receiving core, but I also look at a comp just situationally between him and the team I've been comparing the Patriots to and hoping they follow their lead, the Houston Texans. We looked at Stroud and we wrote him off because we were like, they have no receivers. The Patriots brought in guys who, they're unknowns, but they invested in the draft at the receiver position. And if Jalen Polk and Javon Baker can become, reliable targets for May, and their weaknesses, neither of their weaknesses are their hands. So in theory, he's going to have some sure-handed guys to reel in, some of those potentially off-target throws, which have been Drake May's one real weakness. I think there's a chance he does have some relevance. There's a lot of moving parts to make it happen, which is why he's not as good of a bet for fantasy relevance as Caleb or Jaden Daniels or maybe even Bo Nix. But I think there's a chance there for Drake May. So it's just a guy to keep an eye on. It's just
I might look like an ass here, but I think you're overlooking JJ McCarthy in this conversation. I would rather have, like, in fantasy this year, I'd rather have JJ McCarthy than Drake May. Just because I think you're putting him into an offense that's going to be more set up to succeed under Kevin O'Connell, with Justin Jefferson, with TJ Hawkinson, hopefully for as much of the year as possible, with Aaron Jones in the run game, Jordan Addison. I'm forgetting Jordan Addison. I feel like I don't think any of these other guys, except the two that we talked about, are going to be like truly relevant. Like more, are going to be more than guys that you just don't see on the waivers and you spot start them here and there.
Sure.
I think that McCarthy has the better opportunity in the sense that his offense is probably going to be better than New England's. He may not have the talent of Drake May, but Bo Nix just gross. I don't like much about Bo Nix from a fantasy perspective. I get the Broncos are kind of put in a corner there, but yeah, and what you said about May is fair. It's just I feel like at least this is true for me. Where like I'm sitting here thinking like, oh my god, the Patriots offense is so bad. For the first time in my life, this is a new Patriots. So like you can't come into it with like I'm not going into this thinking like, oh, Mayo's just another Belichick disciple. No, I don't think he's going to be. With Alex Van Pelt at the helm of the offense, I don't think he's going to be. But that said, we still don't know what the hell this offense is going to look like. And I think that doubt as opposed to we know what Kevin O'Connell's offense is going to look like, or at least what they want it to look like.
Yeah, I think my concern with J.J. McCarthy and just the reason he's not really on my redraft radar is like, yeah, he's stepping into a pretty good situation, but like, I don't want to sound ignorant because I don't know what this guy I'm about to mention's profile looks like or strengths and weaknesses comparing the two. But how do we know JJ's not just Nick Mullins? Like Nick Mullins came into the same situation last year and didn't do shit. Maybe JJ is just a mediocre white backup quarterback. Like, and if he is, my thing with Drake May and even with Bo Nix, Pat, is there's a little more with the legs there to rely on. They're both a little more mobile. Tack in 20, 30, 40 rushing yards, maybe a touchdown occasionally, and that's going to keep you afloat when you have a really bad passing day. I know we want to think that just having Justin Jefferson is enough, but I mean we've seen that it's not. Nobody gave a fuck about. I mean, granted, Nick Mullins I think played most of last year without Jefferson, but even if we've seen bad quarterbacks,
the astronaut.
Yeah, we've seen bad quarterbacks all the time not get lifted up enough to fantasy relevance just because they have one good receiver. I mean, I don't think DeAndre Hopkins ever had a fantasy relevant quarterback other than Deshaun Watson. So it's just a tough thing to balance there, and that's why I'm just not really. JJ is so far off my fantasy radar. I would be shocked if JJ
he's off mine too. Don't get me wrong.
I know you're not trying to draft him as a starter or anything like that.
He's at least worth mentioning, especially over Bo Nix. Maybe we've got a discussion here.
I think Bo Nix. We should have a friendly bet. I think Bo Nix finishes as a better fantasy QB this year than JJ McCarthy. Provided average, we'll go points per game, I guess, because there's a chance they don't play the same amount. But I just think we don't even have to put anything on it. Just something to look back on. I think Bo Nix.
Shirtless. Okay.
You want to lose that, so you're just throwing. We'll figure something out. But I think Bo Nix will have a better. And I'm a noted Bo Nix hater. Like I kind of really didn't like the pick. I just think for fantasy, that those things don't always align. So. I think that's where we stand with the quarterbacks. Obviously, Penix off the radar. Obviously, Spencer Rattler might take Derek Carr's job. Who the fuck knows? But we'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it. Let's see, Pat. What do we want to do here? Can we get through the running backs with our 12 minutes left?
Is there anyone really that you feel like here is worth mentioning? Because I feel like these guys are all in similar situations. Trey Benson in Arizona, Blake Corum in Los Angeles, Bucky Irving in Tampa, Jalen Wright in Miami, who I did pick in my Dynasty rookie draft this year, just because, Mike McDaniel and running backs, and Kamani Vidal, also in Los Angeles for the Chargers. I feel like at best, like Trey Benson could be kind of this change of pace guy, but I don't think any of these guys are going to get the kind of work that we presume Jonathan Brooks could get. I feel like they are going to need an injury ahead of them on the depth chart to be relevant.
I think Benson and Corum could have flex value potentially on their own. I know looking at Corum specifically, he's the one that you would have maybe the tougher hill to climb because of how good Kyron Williams was last year. But knowing the offense that he's stepping into and just the absolute lack of depth the Rams had at the position, as good as Kyron Williams was, they didn't want to play him 99% of the snaps.
They just knew Henderson off the fucking street.
They just knew everyone behind him was garbage. So I am curious to see what McVay does now that he has basically a Kyron clone. And Pat, that was a theme here among all these backs that got drafted as far as their strengths. All these teams basically just drafted the running back they already have. Like, they did not draft there was no thunder and lightning being drafted here. It was, we have a guy we like, we're going to get another one of him.
Yeah.
So that's what the Rams did with Blake Corum. It's what the Bucs did with Bucky Irving. Like, we keep waiting for them to draft this power back to complement Rachaad White, and they like this. So it makes it hard to gauge how much work these guys are going to take, because it really just comes down to who's better. And that's the one thing, Pat, that we can't analyze beforehand. We don't know whether Bucky Irving is just going to flat out outplay Rachaad White at some point, whether he's just going to look better on the field. Blake Corum could do the same thing. He could look just as good as Kyron. Suddenly you're in a 50-50 split. So it's one of those weird things that strength and weakness-wise, it's hard to evaluate. Even Jalen Wright, another redundant back for the Dolphins, like, He goes to a place that we know can maximize his skill set because he's a fast back with really good vision. But he's going into a situation with two more of those guys ahead of him already. So yeah, it's a bunch of guys in good spots, but without clear workloads right now.
Can't predict injury, but I feel like if you got a Raheem Mostert, it's probably these guys that we're talking about, Gus Edwards
and Achane even too, unfortunately did not show a propensity to stay healthy.
I really loved him for Dynasty because it's like, Mike McDaniel knows how to make it work with two running backs.
Yeah.
So that wasn't much of a this year pick. So I don't know how much we'll be talking about Jalen Wright this year, barring an injury. Mm-hmm. And same deal with Kamani Vidal in Los Angeles. Like, I love Gus Edwards. He's a one-trick pony. That man is be large and run straight into the line. Yeah. So, if he could kind of show himself as something different, maybe he could have a bit more of a role. I don't know.
Vidal is my probably favorite, dark horse running back now among these guys, and he's becoming a very popular name in the fantasy community, so you're going to hear him a lot more. But just them investing in a running back when they have two supreme question marks ahead of him on the depth chart. Just J.K. Dobbins from a health standpoint and Gus Edwards from a limited skill set standpoint. I think there's a chance that people are looking at Kamani Vidal like he could, emerge like a David Johnson almost way. That's obviously looking a little too far ahead, but definitely a guy. Oh, excuse me, dropping my camera. Definitely a guy.
Whoa! Dude, what's that guy's name? Jeff Tubin, whoever was cranking him on that Zoom call. Or whatever.
That is not me. Definitely a guy that I am interested to take as a dart throw, and I think his ADP is gonna, not rise super high, but I think he's gonna end up above your Jalen Wrights and your Bucky Irvings in redraft when it's all said and done, just because of the potential opportunity there. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. And then, you've got Tyrone Tracy on a weak depth chart with the Giants. He could be a thing. The rest of the running backs, Ray Davis with the Bills, Audric Estime with the Broncos, and Marshawn Lloyd, and then Marshawn Lloyd with the Packers. Just all clear backups or compliments, not guys that are really going to be on the redraft radar. Clearly not on the redraft radar without an injury. Like, those guys have obvious dudes ahead of them. And so, I'm just not really thinking about them. And then receiver-wise, Pat, we went through a lot of guys. Xavier Worthy, we didn't really go through. To me, he went undrafted. I think that's going to be an unpopular thing. I think if other podcasts were to do something like this, the fantasy rookies they expect to contribute right away, Xavier Worthy is definitely going to be a popular name, and he was not with us.
He was the next guy I had, just because, yes, he's boom bust. Yes, he's all speed, but what a good fucking spot to be in. To be that. I don't think the consistency's going to be there. Our boy Rashee Rice just loves breaking the law now. It's his favorite thing to do. So the role could be more, but we've seen it with some of these, speed demons that they brought in. They just kind of suck. Like Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney and, God forbid, Mecole Hardman or MVS. They're just not good. Yeah. Rashee Rice, good. Rashee Rice, criminal. Excuse me. Alleged criminal. Excuse me. Allegedly.
No, fuck him.
So, if you want the best situation for that kind of player, I feel like this is it. With Hollywood Brown, who knows what we're going to see with Travis Kelce. I still think we're going to see a really high level of play from Travis Kelce because, like, his fall off was still not bad. Like, I think it was just for Travis Kelce. It was so bad for Travis Kelce standards that we all kind of, sounded the alarms. But I like Xavier Worthy. I guess it's a good time to lump in the other two guys that went in the late first round, Ricky Pearsall in San Francisco and Xavier Legette in Carolina, who I don't really like at all. Like,
I don't either.
In redraft. In redraft, they are not on my radar in the slightest. I took Xavier Legette in the last round of my Dynasty League just because he was there, and he was a first-round pick. Like, might as well. But those two, I don't think, have a lot of value, even with an injury. Like, I guess Pearsall could force his way in there if they trade Ayuk or Samuel or whoever. But I think Worthy, the role is defined. But it's just, how much is this role going to be compared to some of the guys that we took?
Yeah, I need to know that Xavier Legette is, or I need to know that Bryce Young is able to support a single receiver. And granted, he supported Adam Thielen, I guess, a decent amount last year, but a receiver more like Legette, which is like, a much different skill set than Adam Thielen. And I'm just not convinced that they're going to be able to acclimate a guy like Legette into consistent production. Pearsall, I think, Pat, the way the Niners approach the draft, I don't know if they're just preparing for the inevitability of it next year or if it's still going to happen before this year. But they drafted two receivers and spent a first on Ricky Pearsall. Like, I feel like if I had to guess, if I was a betting man, I still feel like one of Ayuk or Debo is going to be gone before the season starts. And if that happens, then it becomes a little more interesting because you're only fighting with, one other established receiver, whoever ends up staying, and then Kittle, who is notoriously inconsistent in fantasy football. So you've got an opportunity for a guy to step in and be reasonably productive. But yes, Pearsall, as it stands right now, off the radar. And Worthy, the one thing I want to say is, like, you mentioned all those guys who were just fast but bad. I think that comp for Worthy is also, I think he's a little step above that. I think he's got a little more to him as an actual receiver than some of those guys. I think it's so easy to compare him to John Ross and just assume it's going to pan out the same way. Okay. But I don't think it's going to. I think he's going to be an interesting player. But again, even with or without Rashee Rice's suspension, you're still dealing with Hollywood Brown and Travis Kelce on that depth chart. I don't think Hollywood Brown, let's say Xavier Worthy ends up being a really, really, really good player. He just adjusts right away to the NFL. And I don't think Hollywood Brown is like an insurmountable player to jump in targets.
Andy
so
Reid's
it's possible.
Play his guys. Andy Reid's going to give the best players on the team the targets.
Exactly.
That's why Rashee Rice emerged last year, which Sky Moore couldn't do, both being second-round picks.
Exactly. The path is there. So I definitely, Xavier Worthy is like probably a first guy off from the draft that we did. And if I'm honest with myself, especially positionally, like, I'll probably take Xavier Worthy in the Chiefs offense before I take Roman Wilson in a fantasy draft. I just kind of wanted to attach Roman Wilson to myself because I think he'll be good and I want to look back on it if I'm right. Yeah. But Xavier Worthy, in that offense is definitely an interesting guy. And then we get down to, some of the other names, just guys you're going to have to keep on your radar. Like I said, in New England, when Drake May becomes a starter and that passing offense becomes likely higher volume and higher efficiency, I think one of Jalen Polk or Javon Baker is going to end up fantasy relevant. I don't know which one, and I don't know how consistent it'll be, but it just feels like how, Pat, last year we sat here and did this draft, and I remember asking you if you were going to take Tank Dell, and you didn't, and neither did I. And Tank Dell ended up being, other than getting hurt, a revelation in fantasy football. Now, granted, neither Polk or Baker are similar style players to Tank Dell. There are very few players like Tank Dell, build and skill set wise, in the league. But just that kind of situation is one you have to watch out for. Then, of course, you've got A.D. Mitchell steps into a potential wide receiver 2 spot in Indy. Malachi Corley, depth spot in New York. If Mike Williams gets hurt, who knows? And then you've got a bunch of receivers after that. The one guy I want to mention real quick, because I mentioned Devon Achane last year. I think Aniyah Smith is going to pop up on NFL Red Zone a few times this year. I mentioned this last week too. He's not a guy because of the position he plays and because he's going to be more of a gadgety guy than Achane is. I don't think he's going to necessarily be in fantasy lineups, but he is just a guy, again, that I watched a little bit in college, and I'm like, yeah, he's just really fucking good at football. So like That's really all I have to say about him, and I just want to put him on people's radar so that you're not surprised. And you're like, who the fuck is this guy for the Eagles when you see him pop up on Red Zone? And then tight end, Ben Sinnott could emerge for Washington. Theo Johnson, if Darren Waller retires, I think could actually end up with a pretty big role in New York because I just don't think Daniel Bellinger is going to be like a volume guy. Theo Johnson a bit more athletic than him. And then Jatavian Sanders with Carolina. If the Panthers can get any semblance of offense together, I don't think it will be hard for Sanders to jump Tommy Tremble. And again, the one other thing that we can never really predict with fantasy is just who are quarterbacks going to fall in love with and have be their favorite target. It could be fucking Jatavian Sanders. We never know once Bryce Young finally gets it together. So
something.
That's it for our rookie breakdown. Pat, we've got viewer questions, but again, I think it's smart to just save them for next week as we approach the hour 30 mark. They're still going to be relevant. So thank you guys for sending those in. And then just other things really quickly to touch on. Tyler Boyd signed with the Titans. I don't fucking care. Rashad Penny signed with the Panthers. Jonathan Brooks is going to take that backfield. And as we touched on, Rashee Rice is in more legal trouble. So apparently is suspected in a Dallas nightclub assault. This dude, Pat, we talked about all the speed the Chiefs have had at receiver. This dude's he's trying to speed run his way out of the NFL, and I think he's succeeding. So it's going to create a potential vacancy on the Chiefs depth chart. But that'll do it, Pat. You got anything to say in your first show back before we head out?
No, it's good to be back. Bran, you held down the fort well. I don't think I could have. I went on a fucking Nancy Pelosi tangent today out of nowhere. If this was me, it just would have been me. I don't even know if I would have talked about football. Maybe someday we'll have to experience that, but God
I think
forbid.
you would have been arrested. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure how.
Maybe one day we'll find out, but hopefully not a day soon.
The podcast would have just been 15 minutes of you talking and then 45 minutes of police sirens and
the
door
FBI
knocking.
just knocks down the SWAT team. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope a Pat Solo show is not in our future. But as far as we know, Pat, we'll be back next week. Wednesday next week? Different day again next week. We will be back on Wednesday next week.
Back to Tuesday for the foreseeable future. Your boy is traveling a lot.
Yeah, Pat's a man of the world right now. But we'll be back on Wednesday next week and then Tuesday going forward. God only knows what we'll talk about next week, but you'll have to tune in to find out. So for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next week.